PowerPlayChess, brought to you in association with Kagi. Round 9 at the Olympiad, and I'm going to be looking at the top clash between India, leading on 100%, against Uzbekistan, 2 points behind. Now, remember, Uzbekistan won the gold medals at the previous Olympiad in Chennai 2 years ago. So India, well, they only just missed out then. So there's a bit of beef between these two teams. Well, there isn't really, but anyway, certainly both teams looking to do their best here, and it was a really tense match. I'm going to take you through all 4 games. Count them, all 4 games. First off, board 4 game between Vokhidov and Vidit. Vidit playing black. Vokhidov grabbed a pawn. It's interesting, both players were blitzing through these moves. It looked like all preparation. I mean, it's a pretty well-known line. Basically, black has enough play here for the pawn. And after this is pretty much a forced draw. It's a temporary piece sacrifice. If the knight moves, then black will give perpetual check on g4 and f3. Vokhidov played queen d6. He's hoping that black will take so he can recapture the queen. But rook d8 pushes the queen away. The queen keeps hold of the knight. The rook attacks the queen again, and you can see they're repeating the position. They did it 3 times, and so that was a draw. So 1 down. Let's turn to Gukesh against Abdusattor. So this is the top board. Gukesh on pretty good form. Abdusattor on really good form as well. So he's, in the top 10. I think he's actually number 6 in the world. Gukesh number 5. It's a knight off. A4, just controlling black's expansion. So we have a typical knight off pawn structure with this backward pawn on d6, but the pawn on e5 controlling very important squares. Well, we see this pawn structure in the Kalashnikov, in the Sveshnikov, and the Najdorf. It's very common indeed. I mean, I've played with this pawn structure practically my entire chess career, so I always feel very comfortable with this kind of structure. A lot of people online have said, well, what about that hole on d5? What about that backward d pawn? Isn't it weak? Well, not if you're aware of the issues, basically. I really like Abdusattorov's next move. Queen c8. Now that's a little bit unusual. Normally you reserve c8 for the rook. So what is this queen up to? Well, it's partly because it covers important squares on this diagonal. But the real reason is that it allows the bishop to bounce round. Now, in the Kalashnikov course, I call this the bad bishop bounce. So it wasn't doing much on e7, but if it bounces out to a5, then that is really useful and starts to put pressure on this pawn. And if queen takes d6, yeah, bishop a5 gives excellent compensation. And this is really common that you can just give up this pawn and you get really good piece play. So bishop g5 played, so that prevents this bishop running away because white will damage the pawns there. So h6. Black has the 2 bishops. Once again, queen takes d6 is really risky. It just gives black's pieces tremendous activity here. Now, either knight b4 or knight d4 both look really strong to me. So knight d5 played instead by Gukesh, so occupying that square. And once again, the bad bishop bounce. It's a really nice maneuver and very common with this pawn structure. Now, how do you deal with a knight on d5? Well, the bishop is on an excellent square, putting pressure on the knight. And again, absolutely typical maneuver. You play knight e7 to put even more pressure here. Of course, if you can exchange that off, and if white is forced to recapture with a pawn, that's a really promising structure for black, because you'll get these E and F pawns, the Rolling Stones rolling down the board. I mean, this is absolutely fine for black, this position. No difficulties at all. Notice how far the knight is from d5. So Gukesh played knight e3. Queen d7, a5. You could go b6 straight away, but bishop c7 played. And now b6. Look at that wonderful bishop. Really nice. So knight c4. Yeah, the knights need to find squares. And Abdusattor simply exchanged off the knight here. Yeah, in this case, there was a bit too much pressure. But again, a very typical scenario where black is left with these two pieces against these two pieces. d5 is very well covered. And now black gets counterplay against this pawn, a5 of course. So this is the backward pawn. This is a backward pawn too. So basically it balances out. And rook d8, rook b8, excuse me. And I mean basically it's a roughly level position. And this is really typical actually. Remember that e pawn gives black more control in the centre. You can use that d4 square if that knight gets to d4. I call this the Trojan horse once it reaches d4. I mean, with the knight on d4, I think black would have a clear advantage. So knight c2, very important move. Defending this and defending this. And now the players repeat. After knight a7, presumably it wants to come here. So knight a3 played, and the players repeated the position. There we go, another repetition. And a draw. There we are. Yeah, decent play by Abdusattor, who basically neutralised any kind of play that Gukesh had. So, yeah, fair result. Right, moving on. We have Sindarov against Pragyanananda. So it's a French advance. And Queen b6, I mean, I've discussed this before. I mean, you can play both Queen b6 and Bishop d7. I slightly prefer Bishop d7. I think it's more flexible for black. But Prag obviously knows his stuff. a3. This is one of the reasons why I'm not too comfortable with Queen b6, because I think this move b4 can kind of squash the queen a bit. But, you know, Prag was ready with his response. Knight h6, very typical. The knight is coming here. Well, in this case, it goes to g4 to snap off that bishop, because here it would be vulnerable. It could be taken. Both players playing pretty quickly here. Black is a bit cramped. I mean, white has secured the centre. That's very nice with the pawn on e3. Securing the d4 pawn. These pawns shut out black's minor pieces. So Prag's next move, very good move, knight b8. So what's the idea? Basically you want to put the bishop here, get the rook here, and black starts to get play. And I really like this next move from Sindarov. b5. So you can see that knight is completely stymied. Those squares are controlled. The bishop can't move as well. So very typical using these queenside pawns. But actually, it's a pawn sacrifice. Bishop takes pawn. Of course, Sindarov realised this. Because rook takes allows rook c1. So castles kingside played very quickly. Now that is a threat, bishop e7. But rook b1, this basically prevents black breaking with a6. I mean, you can see white has serious compensation because black is so cramped. Look at these pieces. They simply can't move. And there's pressure against a7, so the queen really can't move either. Prag gets out, and okay, white can't make any more progress on the queen side, so plays g4. And the king side initiative starts. Now, these rooks look pretty good, but that bishop just kind of holds everything. prevents the rook coming down to c2. So this is quite a serious initiative that Sindarov has here. I think Prag plays very well. He has to bring that knight over. Now, watch out for some kind of check here. So king h8. King h1. So this prepares possibly a rook coming to g1. So that knight is shuffled over. I mean, black's position, I mean, it's really tight manoeuvring. I mean, it's clear that white still has compensation. Knight f3, the next knight is spinning over. Rook a3, I think it's a good decision. Just to exchange off one of those rooks. Because it means that it might be possible to exchange off that second rook. At least white always has to be aware of that. Which, of course, would diminish white's attacking chances on the king side. But now it all kicks off. Knight f6. I mean, this is so scary. Of course, it would be crazy to actually take this knight because, you know, this queen would just be able to enter on the king side. I mean, black can try and defend, but no, it's not good. The thing is, what exactly is that knight doing on f6? Prag had previously brought that knight over. It defends h7. How can white bring more pressure to bear? Well, he's switching this one. And of course, he would very much like to play queen h5, but that's why bishop e7 was played. I mean, this is quite scary. But queen h5 isn't possible because black would take here. And what's the score? Black is one pawn up. Actually, black is absolutely fine there. More than fine, actually. Should be good for black. So black is threatening to take here. So rook f1 defends that. Again, it would be crazy for black to take the knight. Rook here, knight up. I mean, it looks terrifying. But Prag defends very coolly. So the queen has to defend that bishop. Now, I guess you could play h5 here. Possibly h6. But I still don't quite see where white is breaking through. And, you know, at some point, there's going to be the chance to exchange rooks as well. So Sindarov took on e8 and just played king g2 and brought his king up the board. So that means he's in less danger on the back rank, although, you know, the king's a little bit exposed if black were ever to break through. But it also means that having exchanged on e8, that there's pressure on f7. And, well, that relieves the pressure. So, you know, on a good day, that queen might be able to run and get some counterplay. But rook g3, so that means there could be a nasty check here. So the king went back in the corner. And yes, you guessed it, it's another repetition. We've had 3 repetitions in 3 games. Call off the match. No, not quite. We've still got 1 game to go. And that was really tense. So anyway, 3-fold repetition. That game ended in a draw. So it all went down to the game between Arjun Erigaisi and Shamsiddin Vokhidov on board 3. Now it's a Berlin, but Erigaisi goes for this really sharp line. Instead of, you know, playing the end game, he goes for this pawn sacrifice. So this is known. Of course, it's risky. I'm just going to zip through these moves because I want to get to the really interesting position. So this has been seen before. I mean, looking at this position, it's quite clear that white is better out of the opening. I mean, structurally not better. You can see it's virtually symmetrical, the pawn structures. But white's pieces are simply better. The queen is active. All these pieces are active. The second rook wants to come over. And black has yet to develop. And this knight kind of gets in the way. So, Erigaisi looking good. Of course, he's having an absolutely storming Olympiad. And he's now, he's number 4 in the world. I mean, he's quite incredible. Rook e1. So still looking really good here. Black would love to be able to challenge on the e-file, but, well, for various reasons, that's not on. You know, these pawns and the knight are vulnerable. So rook d8. And now white, Erigaisi really goes for it. I mean, he's not afraid to attack. g4. Knight d6, hitting the rook. And rook d4. So this g-pawn advance introduces all kinds of interesting ideas. I mean, possibly at some point g5 and rook h4. But when you play g5, of course, it gives that square away, so it's not on at the moment. Possibly this idea, switching that way. And there's another idea too. Rook e d1. Okay, it's time that you had a think. Time for me to have a drink. So black to play. You're under massive pressure here. How do you play with black? Cheers, folks. Black to play. If you get this, well done. Did you spot this move? Rook d7. It looks such an ugly move. What's that rook doing? Blocking the bishop. Well, needs must. Okay, let's just play another move. What about b5? Well, then this is the problem. Queen e5. And pin and win. I mean, black is just bust in that position. So that's the threat. So basically, rook d7. It's really ugly, but you have to do it. It defends the queen. And it also defends f7, which is often a problem as well. But basically defends the queen so that if queen at e5, then you can play knight b5. And actually, black is okay. But, of course, this is pretty ugly. And white still has a glorious position here. Rook d3. So could be this rook is swinging across. Knight e8. So black is desperate to exchange. But this still looks fantastic for white. All four pieces in play. You know, moves like knight g5 coming, hitting these two. Therefore, h6. And now crunch moment. Erigaisi played a very attractive move, queen g6. Of course, that's pinned. But actually, he should have gone for queen h4. And then g5. This is really powerful. But he went for queen g6. I mean, it looks amazing. But incredibly, after this move, threatening c4 and just activating the bishop, black is okay. It's remarkable. Knight takes c5. So if queen takes, then rook takes bishop. But bishop takes g4. And after this exchange, well, material is level, and actually black is all right here. Black is stable enough. You know, this pawn is protected. This pawn is protected. Black is solid enough. Let me just go a few moves further on. Of course, they're reaching the time control. They're under time pressure. And black is playing very responsibly. So everything is protected. So black should play king g8 here. And everything is still okay. I mean, I slightly prefer white with its wonderful bishop. But black played knight e8. Okay, how would you play with white here? Time for me to have another drink. Cheers. Time for you to have another think. White to play. This was the big moment in the match. Big moment in this game. Big moment in the match. Erigaisi could have taken on f7. And if queen takes, here's the move you have to spot. I hope you spotted this. Queen d4, that's the killer. Of course, that's pin. And after the knight blocks, queen d8 is a winning move, because if queen e8, then queen takes c7. What a shocker. But Erigaisi didn't see it and instead played rook e3. And after this, with the knight on f6, the danger had passed and black is rock solid again. Of course, with no g-pawn to attack the knight, then that knight is completely stable on f6. Now, they played another 30 moves, but basically neither player got anywhere at all, and that ended in draw. So the match ended 2-2 with 4 draws, but that was a real fight of a match. It was very tense indeed. Now, that draw meant that other teams had a chance to catch up, and the US defeated Hungary, a very tight match. They won 2.5, 1.5. So that means we're on for the big matchup in round 10. India on 17 points, so no longer on 100%, but India on 17 against the USA on 15 points. I should mention Uzbekistan and China are also on 15 points. So it's been blown wide open again. But if India can survive against the USA tomorrow, then they should be home and dry. Just about. But that is going to be the big match. I'll report back on that. By the way, in the women's event, India lost. And... Sorry, India didn't lose. Got to get this right. This is very important. India drew 2-2, but Kazakhstan won. They beat Poland, and now Kazakhstan are in the lead on their own with 16 points. India are a point behind on 15. So that one is wide open again as well. I'll report back. See you tomorrow.